I'm talking about Propaganda by Edward Bernays. And this is the sort of book that is cited very frequently, but you don't normally have time to get to it until it's been cited too many times for you to ignore it. And I don't remember precisely when that happened, but at some point I'd heard about it too many times and I thought, well, I have to read this book finally. For those of you who don't know, Edward Bernays was a nephew of Sigmund Freud. He is often considered the father of public relations, or what he would refer to engineering consent. I would say the first, let's say, third or so of the book is spent explaining what this concept is, explaining why it's a good thing to engineer consent. And then I would say the final two-thirds of the book are about offering case studies to business executives as to why they need a PR department. It turns out he's the person who wrote the book on it. So you should hire him. And he wasn't lacking in experience. He was part of the group that sold World War I to the American public, making sure that it would be a war that would make the world safe for democracy, if you remember that. He was also integral in the United Fruit Company's policies and propaganda in Central America, which if you'd like to get a little more into that, there's a wonderful book called Bananas, How the United Fruit Company Shaped the World. And I'll put a link to that in the description. Fascinating little book. You wouldn't think too much about it until you dug deeper and you realized just how much private companies or even publicly traded ones can play roles in shaping the course of events and the the development of governments and countries around the world. In any case, Bernays, propaganda. Propaganda itself, you have to realize, if you look in the dictionary, it has a neutral meaning. I think it's come to have a very negative connotation these days, but you can be propagandized for good things. So, for example, look both ways before you cross the street. This is propagandized to children. I will do it as an uncle. I'll look both ways before crossing the street. That is propaganda that is given. Remember that propaganda is neither good nor bad. It's just simply a way of pushing a particular point of view to someone. And the narrative that Bernays gives us is, look, modern society is complicated. We don't really have any other choice other than to engage in propaganda, and we need to do it for the good of everyone. So there are two fundamental premises there that you have to accept Bernays' vision of the world. One is that this is just how modern society is. There will be no going back. And secondly, that this has to be taken care of for the dummies of the world, the average man on the street, by the elites. The elites will take care of you. We'll take on this burden for you because you're so dumb, and we will help shape the opinion for you. So obviously, I resist both of these premises, not in the sense that I'm out marching in the streets, but the idea that there can be no pushback to the way modern life is situated and continues to grow. That's not true. Many people have continued to adapt and find ways to preserve some kind of normalcy amongst this march towards our techno future. And that you need the elites to take care of you. I think we've seen this over the past few years, as something that has developed organically among differing nations and differing peoples around the world, that we do not necessarily accept that these smart people, which is what they're always going to say, well, we're smarter than you. The idea that smart people are also infallible. So because you're smart, that means you're never self-interested. That means you're never selfish. That means you never make decisions for personal reasons, not for the greater good. So being smart somehow makes you this great person that needs to rule us. Or it makes, like, for example, business people into doctors or virologists when they're neither. So I'm gonna read just a few paragraphs from the book that I think are wonderful, and then I'm just going to encourage you to read it because it's not very long. My edition is 124 pages. It's a wonderful work for you to understand. Not wonderful in itself because I really dislike Bernays' vision of the world, but I really respect that he took the time to come out and tell you exactly what he thinks about everything, because this is a blueprint that's being used by the elites to the present day. So this is the very first paragraph of the book. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of the country. Is that a conspiracy theory? Is he part of QAnon? Is this guy a Trump voter? This is 1928. Bernays, who had already helped America get involved in World War I. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. Vast numbers of human beings must cooperate in this manner if they are to live together as a smoothly functioning society. That's an assertion. That's not proof. That's just Bernays' opinion about how modern society has to be. Modern society has to be molded by people you'll never know, you'll never meet. In theory, and this is not from the first paragraph, sorry, there's just a couple pages on. In theory, everybody buys the best and cheapest commodities offered him on the market. In practice, if everyone went around pricing and chemically tasting before purchasing the dozens of soaps or fabrics or brands of bread which are for sale, economic life would be hopelessly jammed. To avoid such confusion, society consents to have its choice narrowed to ideas and objects brought to its attention through propaganda of all kinds. There is consequently a vast and continuous effort going on to capture our minds in the interest of some policy or commodity or idea. Now, he's not wrong here, but the way that you'd see it, the way that it's been the way since biblical times, is if you go to any farmer's market, you'll see that many of the goods are identical. Wherever you are in the world, you'll see this person has some fruit and that person has some fruit, but maybe you have a relationship with this fruit seller, or this one's friendlier, or this one offers better prices, but they are trying to convince you, propagandize you. That's not sinister. But his idea is, well, modern life requires that this has to be done through advertising and all these other sorts of things. And that's not true. It is an efficient way to do it. And it's something that definitely redounds to big business. But realistically, does the small farmer who sells at the farmer's market, do they need to be concerned about all this? No, but they've been forced into it by the new way of economic promotion of products, that the paradigm of this of our society at this time. So you can continue to hold out and work out in a more limited way, and that's possible. Bernays is ruling that out as something that isn't really feasible and would grind society to a halt, which is not true. This invisible intertwining structure, so he's talking about how people freely associate with each other, which is a good thing. This invisible intertwining structure of groupings and associations is the mechanism by which democracy has organized its group mind and simplified its mass thinking. To deplore the existence of such a mechanism is to ask for a society such as never was and never will be. To admit that it exists but expect that it shall not be used is unreasonable. Again, both of these assertions are false. The idea that societies have never had small associations of people working together, but then necessarily have to move towards and be controlled by a hive mind is wrong. It's not true. We've had numerous societies that have existed over time in which there have been free associations and groupings. And then to admit that it exists but expect that it will not be used is unreasonable. So he wants the power to be used by certain people. Here's another point, and this is only chapter 2. Universal literacy was supposed to educate the common man to control his environment. Once he could read and write, he would have a mind fit to rule. So ran the democratic doctrine. But instead of a mind, universal literacy has given him rubber stamps. Rubber stamps inked with advertising slogans, with editorials, with published scientific data, with the trivialities of the tabloids and the platitudes of history, but quite innocent of original thought. Each man's rubber stamps are the duplicates of millions of others, so that when those millions are exposed to the same stimuli, all received identical imprints. It may seem an exaggeration to say that the American public gets most of its ideas in this wholesale fashion. The mechanism by which ideas are disseminated on a large scale is propaganda, in the broad sense of an organized effort to spread a particular belief or doctrine. I could keep reading from this all day, but I'm just going to limit to a few more. This is the beginning of chapter 3. Who are the men who, without our realizing it, give us our ideas, tell us whom to admire and whom to despise, what to believe about the ownership of public utilities, about the tariff, about the price of rubber, about the Dawes Plan, about immigration, who tell us how our houses should be designed, what furniture we should put into them, what menus we should serve at our table, what kind of shirts we must wear, what sports we should indulge in, what plays we should see, what charities we should support, what pictures we should admire, what slang we should affect, what jokes we should laugh at. Might I add, who will tell us about things that are safe and effective, or why it's important to flatten the curve, as it might be. In some departments of our daily life in which we imagine ourselves free agents, we are ruled by dictators exercising great power. A little further on, this is in chapter 4. Trotter and Le Bon concluded that the group mind does not think in the strict sense of the word. In place of thoughts, it has impulses, habits, and emotions. In making up its mind, its first impulse is usually to follow the example of a trusted leader. I'll conclude with this. And this is the beginning of where he talks about weaponizing propaganda for your business. And he's making the case to C-level executives. The newer salesmanship, understanding the group structure of society and principles of mass psychology, would ask, who is it that influences the eating habits of the world? The answer obviously is the physicians. The new salesman will then suggest to physicians to say publicly that it is wholesome to eat bacon. He knows as a mathematical certainty that large numbers of persons will follow the advice of their doctors, because he understands the psychological relation of dependence of men upon their physicians. So, if the physician tells you that it's good to eat bacon, you'll eat the bacon because you trust your doctor. If the doctor tells you such and such a shot is safe and effective when it is neither, then you'll still trust the doctor because it's the person in the white lab coat. This is something that we saw very recently. So, cannot recommend this enough as a book that written in the 1920s, written by someone who is a practitioner of the art of propaganda, who is unconsciously or perhaps very consciously and carelessly revealing the dark arts, at least the mechanisms underlying the dark arts, the philosophy underlying the dark arts of propaganda, which can be weaponized for the, shall we say, wars on terror and other such things. So if you'd like to buy this book and support the channel, there'll be a link to it below. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like, subscribe, go back through the channel and see other videos, forward them to friends that might be interested. If you really enjoyed it, feel free to support my Patreon. I'll also put I'll put my Amazon wish list in there. Someone had suggested that recently. If there's a book from there that you want me to buy, if you want to send it to me and I'll review it here in the channel, that's something else that we can do as well. We'll give that a shot. Until next time, enjoy your reading.